You already know that Odysseus spent 10 agonizing years trying to commute home from the Trojan War, dodging sea monsters, and battling his own crew's sheer incompetence. But we need to take a massive step back. Because how exactly did an entire generation of Greek kings get stuck fighting on a foreign beach for a full decade in the first place? If you think the Trojan War started over complex geopolitics, trade route disputes, or a fight for resources, you are vastly overestimating ancient Greek leadership. The bloodiest, most legendary conflict in ancient mythology started for one reason and one reason only. Someone didn't get an invite to a wedding, and everyone involved was violently petty. Welcome to the Iliad, or as I like to call it, the world's most expensive, overblown breakup. Let's break down how a piece of fruit and a massive ego trip ended up burning a whole civilization to the ground. The apple incident. Our story starts at a massive divine wedding. All the gods are invited, except for Eris. Eris is the goddess of discord, meaning she is literally the embodiment of toxic drama. Naturally, you don't invite the drama friend to a wedding. But Eris finds out, shows up anyway, and instead of making a scene, she does something infinitely worse. She tosses a solid gold apple into the middle of the dance floor. Engraved on the apple are 3 words, "To the fairest." Immediately, the 3 most powerful goddesses in the room, Hera, queen of the gods, Athena, goddess of war, and Aphrodite, goddess of love, all reach for the apple. They demand that Zeus decide who is the prettiest. Zeus, who is terrible at being a husband but surprisingly smart in this one specific moment, refuses to answer. Instead, he delegates this absolute nightmare of a PR crisis to a random mortal prince named Paris. Paris is a Trojan royal currently working as a shepherd, and he has the decision-making skills of a drunken frat bro. The goddesses teleport to him and offer bribes. Hera offers him control of all of Asia. Athena offers him infinite wisdom and guaranteed victory in every battle he ever fights. Aphrodite offers him the most beautiful woman on earth. Paris, ignoring literal world domination and god-tier intelligence, chooses the girl. The worst wingman in history. There is just one massive problem with Aphrodite's bribe. The most beautiful woman in the world is Helen, and she is currently married to Menelaus, the king of Sparta. Paris sails to Sparta as a diplomatic guest. Menelaus welcomes him, feeds him, and lets him stay in his palace. In return, the moment Menelaus leaves town on a business trip, Paris packs up Menelaus's treasure, packs up Menelaus's wife, and completely absconds back to Troy. When Menelaus gets home and finds his house empty, he absolutely loses his mind. He immediately calls his older brother, Agamemnon, who is the king of Mycenae and effectively the mafia boss of ancient Greece. Agamemnon has been looking for an excuse to conquer Troy for years. So, he doesn't just send a strongly worded letter. He invokes an old political treaty, demanding that every single king, prince, and warlord in Greece pack up their armies and sail to Troy to get his brother's wife back. Draft Dodging 101. Now, you'd think these legendary Greek heroes would be thrilled to go to war. They absolutely were not. In fact, the 2 most important guys in the army tried to dodge the draft in incredibly embarrassing ways. First, they go to recruit Odysseus. Odysseus just had a newborn son and does not want to go die on a beach. So when the recruiters show up, he pretends to be clinically insane. The smartest man in Greece strips down to his rags, hooks an ox and a donkey to the same plow, and starts aggressively planting salt in the beach sand while babbling nonsense. The recruiter, completely unamused, simply grabs Odysseus's infant son and tosses him right in front of the moving plow. Odysseus instantly snaps out of character, stops the plow to save his kid, and the recruiter just stares at him like, "Get in the boat, loser." Then there is Achilles. Achilles is a demigod, practically invulnerable, and the single greatest weapon of mass destruction in the ancient world. His mother, a sea goddess, knows he is destined to die at Troy, so she hides him on a remote island by dressing him up as a teenage girl and hiding him in a royal harem. Yes, the most lethal warrior in human history tried to dodge the Trojan War by putting on a dress, and hanging out with princesses. Odysseus figures out where Achilles is hiding, dresses up as a traveling merchant, and lays out a bunch of jewelry and dresses on a table, with one massive, gorgeous broadsword hidden in the middle. While all the girls are looking at the jewelry, Achilles immediately grabs the sword and starts doing martial arts drills. Cover blown. He gets drafted too. Fast forward 9 years. They assemble a fleet of 1,000 ships, sail to Troy, and then, absolutely nothing happens for 9 years. Troy has massive, impenetrable walls built by the gods themselves. The Greeks can't get in. So for 9 straight years, the Greek army just acts like an oversized pirate fleet, raiding neighboring farming villages, stealing livestock, and kidnapping local women to act as war prizes. Which brings us to the actual plot of the Iliad. The Iliad does not cover the whole 10-year war. It covers a few weeks in the 10th year, and it all starts because Agamemnon is the worst manager in recorded history. The Great Tantrum. During a raid, Agamemnon kidnaps a girl named Chrysis. Unfortunately for him, her father is a high priest of Apollo. The priest begs for his daughter back, offering a massive ransom. Agamemnon mocks him and kicks him out of the camp. Apollo, the god of archery and plague, takes this personally. He sits on a cloud above the Greek camp and just starts firing plague-infested arrows into the army. For 9 days, Greek soldiers and animals are dropping dead from a divine biological weapon. Achilles finally calls a staff meeting and says, "Hey, maybe we should give the girl back so the sun god stops nuking us with diseases?" Agamemnon, whose ego is more fragile than glass, agrees to give the girl back, but insists that he needs a replacement prize so he doesn't look weak. So, as the commander-in-chief, he decides to confiscate Achilles' war prize, a girl named Briseis. Achilles loses his absolute mind. He essentially tells Agamemnon, "I do 99% of the fighting in this army. You sit in a tent drinking wine, and now you're stealing my stuff? I'm done." Achilles formally goes on strike. The greatest warrior in the world goes back to his tent, sits down, and refuses to fight. He even cries to his goddess mother, literally saying, "Mom, my boss is being mean to me. Make the Greeks lose so they realize how much they need me." Chaos and god stabbing. Without Achilles, the Greek army starts getting completely dismantled. The Trojans, led by their heroic Prince Hector, push out of their city and start slaughtering the Greeks. This is where the battles get genuinely unhinged. The gods are heavily involved, treating the war like a giant fantasy football league. Athena buffs a Greek warrior named Diomedes so hard that he just goes on a berserker rampage. Diomedes isn't just killing mortals. He is actively killing anyone in his path. Aphrodite swoops down to save Paris from getting choked to death by Menelaus, and Diomedes literally stabs the goddess of love in the wrist. Ares, the literal god of war, joins the fight, and Diomedes stabs him in the stomach with a spear, making the god of war run away, crying to Mount Olympus. But despite Diomedes being an absolute unit, the Trojans push the Greeks all the way back to their ships and start setting the boats on fire. The tragedy of Patroclus. If the boats burn, the Greeks are permanently stranded. They will all die. But Achilles is still sitting in his tent, holding his grudge, watching the smoke rise. His closest companion, and depending on the historian you ask, definitely his boyfriend, Patroclus, is horrified. Patroclus begs Achilles to do something. When Achilles refuses, Patroclus begs to borrow Achilles' famous armor. The logic is that if the Trojans see Achilles' armor on the battlefield, they'll panic and retreat, buying the Greeks time. Achilles agrees, but gives Patroclus one strict rule. Push them away from the ships, and then come right back. Do not try to attack the city walls. Patroclus puts on the armor and charges. It works perfectly. The Trojans are terrified and sprint away from the burning ships. But the adrenaline gets to Patroclus. He forgets the warning. He chases the Trojans all the way back to the walls of Troy, fighting like a demon. Finally, the god Apollo steps in, knocks Patroclus's helmet off, and stuns him. Hector, the prince of Troy, steps up and drives a spear through Patroclus, killing him. Hector then strips the legendary armor off Patroclus's body and puts it on himself. Demonic revenge mode. When the news reaches Achilles, his reaction is apocalyptic. He doesn't just cry. He pours hot ashes over his head and screams so loudly that his goddess mother hears it at the bottom of the ocean. The petty strike is over. The grudge against Agamemnon is entirely forgotten. Achilles is entering a state of unhinged, demonic revenge. His mother gets the god of the forge to make him a brand new suit of armor, and the next morning, Achilles walks out onto the battlefield. What follows is not a battle. It is a massacre. Achilles kills so many Trojans so fast, tossing their bodies into the local river, that the river actually gets clogged with corpses. The river god gets so angry about the pollution that the river literally rises up, forms a giant water monster, and tries to drown Achilles. Achilles fights the river. He fights water. And he wins, because the fire god Hephaestus drops a meteor of flame on the river to dry it up. Every single Trojan army unit sprints in absolute terror back behind the impenetrable walls of Troy, except for one man, Hector. The duel. Hector stays outside the gates, knowing he has to face the monster he created. But when Achilles finally charges at him, completely covered in blood and looking like the god of death, Hector's nerve breaks. He runs. Achilles chases Hector around the massive walls of Troy 3 full times. Finally, Athena tricks Hector into stopping and fighting. It's not even a contest. Achilles knows the weak spots of the armor Hector is wearing because it used to be his own armor. He drives a spear straight through Hector's neck. As he's dying, Hector begs Achilles to return his body to his parents for a proper burial. Achilles looks down at him and says, and this is an actual quote, "I wish my stomach would let me cut your flesh in strips and eat you raw." Achilles ties Hector's dead body to the back of his chariot by the ankles, whips his horses, and drags the prince of Troy through the dirt in front of his screaming wife and parents on the city walls. He takes the body back to the Greek camp and drags it around Patroclus's tomb every single day. It is an incredibly dark, toxic level of grief. The heartbreaking ending. But the story doesn't end with a battle. It ends with a conversation. 12 days later, in the dead of night, King Priam of Troy, an old, fragile man, sneaks past the entire Greek army, walks right into the tent of the man who slaughtered his son, and drops to his knees. Priam, the king of the enemy, kisses the hands of Achilles, the hands that are covered in his children's blood. Priam begs for Hector's body. He tells Achilles to think of his own aging father back home. And in that moment, the rage finally breaks. The greatest killer in the world looks at the broken old king, and they both just start weeping. They cry for Hector, they cry for Patroclus, and they cry for the absolute senseless waste of a 10-year war. Achilles gives the body back and guarantees a 12-day truce so Troy can bury their prince. That is where the Iliad ends. Not with the wooden horse, not with the fall of the city, but with two enemies realizing the terrible cost of their own egos. Of course, a few weeks later, Odysseus gets the brilliant idea to build a giant wooden horse. They slaughter everyone in the city while they sleep. And then Odysseus gets lost at sea for another 10 years because nobody in this mythology knows how to quit while they're ahead. But that, as we know, is a catastrophic commute for another video.